I'm AJ Vanning, and welcome back for episode 6 of Dungeon Masters Inc. Welcome back for episode 6. Today, we're talking about combat speed, and I brought my boy, Logan.
I'm Logan, and my current character is Durnavir the Sorcerer. I've been playing for 4. I've been consistent.
Are you a DM, and how many years have you been DMing?
Yes, for about half that time, 2 years.
So, Logan, one of the things I know it's a big pain for some DMs is combat speed. When players take forever to get through their rounds.
Yeah, I've had some players that either they don't know what they're doing, or they don't know what they want to do, and it just takes them forever to get through it.
Well, there's a lot of tips and tricks that we're going to talk about in this episode that can help players get over that. But there's a lot of other things out there for you DMs to keep in mind. Number of players will always matter. The more players you have, the longer the round takes. That's a truth. Other things that can take time are things like critical hit decks. You know, the cards for critical hits instead of just using the normal rules, the fumble rules and critical hit decks.
I always use the crit decks and the fumble decks because it doesn't add too much time for the players that know what they're doing, but it makes things a lot more interesting.
They definitely make things a lot more interesting. And if your group is, how should we say, a more experienced group and they can move through them quicker, it won't slow it down. But when you have some players that aren't used to it, it can really bring the game to a standstill. So as a DM, just kind of be wary what your group is, whether you implement a critical hit deck or a fumble deck. Now there's other cards like the luck cards and the unluck cards, and those don't seem to matter. If you roll a 20, they just end up drawing one, or the DM ends up drawing one kind of at their own leisure. So they don't really interrupt gameplay very much.
Yeah, because they're not normally an instant effect. It's a hold on to it until you can use it.
Right.
It's like a trump card. It's like, haha.
Yeah, exactly. But number of players is the big one, and your experienced players. So the more players you have, the slower combat's going to take. That's for sure. So there's all types of players that can sit around your table, but there's one that seems to take the cake.
Let me guess. It's the time wasters.
It's the time wasters. Okay, Braylon, it's your turn.
Oh, it's my turn?
Durnavir, it's your turn.
Okay, I'm gonna cast... Actually, I have a feat that lets me have an extra bonus action. Dorban, it's your turn.
Okay, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go ahead and start playing a bard song. The ranger, why don't you go ahead and shoot arrows down the hallway, and the spellcasters, give them some cover. That way the fighter and the monk can get into the room and start working on the zombies. Meanwhile, cleric, I want you to move forward and turn undead. Then go ahead and start casting cures on anybody who needs it, and I'll go ahead and do any extra melee on any of the peripheral zombies that are still alive. And by that time, we should have this whole thing cleared out.
Let me think. Okay, I think maybe I'll take 20 feet step. No, I don't want to do that. No, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna come over here, and then no, let me go back. Hold on, let me go back. All right, no, I'm gonna cast a spell. No, I don't want to do that because then no. Well, I don't know. Let me think about it.
So those are the time wasters. Now, there's a lot of things as a DM you can do to kind of help solve this problem. I think the first one are initiative trackers.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. It doesn't matter what type of initiative tracker you're using, whether it's something digital or, you know, you have a board or little hangy cards.
Yeah, all it has to be is clear.
Yeah.
Everyone's got to be able to see it at once. You got to be able to point to it. It's like, you're up next. Look at it. I shouldn't have to tell you.
Right, definitely. And that being said, the best thing about initiative trackers is letting the player know when their turn is coming. It's not so much about the player whose turn it is, it's the ones that are coming. Who's on deck.
Mm-hmm.
And as a DM, depending on what kind of initiative tracker you're using, I have a tendency, if somebody's starting their turn, I'll go ahead and say, so-and-so, it's your turn. So-and-so, you're on deck. And that way that person knows they're coming right after this person, so they can go ahead and start thinking
about what you want to do.
Definitely think
Start
about
thinking.
In fact, as a DM, if you pay a lot of attention to your characters and you kind of know what their capabilities are, certain classes, so for example, like a cleric, if a cleric in his kind of opening statement declares he's going to cure somebody, and that's an action, and there's not really much left for him to possibly do, sometimes I'll just have the next character go ahead and start making their turn.
Roll on over.
Yeah, I'll just say, the cleric will be like, well, I'm going to heal so-and-so, and I'll just kind of look at the next player and go ahead and start making your turn, and that way that player can go ahead and get going. Usually if the cleric decides he's going to do a bonus action of something else, the bonus action usually doesn't interfere with combat in any way, shape, or form.
There's also patterns to think about. Some players, when you know that they're doing something and they never really do anything after that, you can go ahead and roll it over.
Yeah,
I do that.
That's for sure.
Friends do that.
Yeah, you'll start to notice patterns within your players. Their go-tos, what they usually do, their opening rounds, closing rounds, when somebody's down, things like that. And as a DM, when a player has used his action, his bonus action, and his free action, and his movement, there's really nothing else for him to do. So you go ahead and just roll it over, so he doesn't take it back. So those are some of the main things you can do to help your players kind of know when it's their turn. But my all-time favorite, and the one I go to the most, you got to know it, you got to love it.
The Sand Timer of Doom.
Of Doom. So, I got the Sand Timer in order to solve the Time Waster problem. And the way I figured it was, and the way I explain it to my players, is the Sand Timer is there for you to tell me what you're going to do. You don't have to necessarily do all your rolls and complete everything and all the damage within the Sand Timer, which, by the way, is 30 seconds. It's a 30-second timer.
You just declare what you're doing within that time, and you're good.
Right. As long as you can tell me what you're going to do. I want to run up and I'm going to attack the monster.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. We'll take care of everything else off the timer as long as it takes. We need to do it. Whatever the rolls happen, that's how we'll do it. But a character who can't form that thought within that 30 seconds of that Sand Timer, the way I play it at the table is the character is really in mental paralysis.
Yeah, they're confused.
They're confused.
They're frozen.
They froze.
Yeah. So it makes sense in game. So it's not a meta thing. It gives some sense to the game.
Yeah, and I think so too, because we really don't play, I know we're playing heroes, but at the same time...
You can't just sit there like,
Right. Yeah, you can't sit
With a
back and
monster in
just
your
think
face.
about everything with a monster in your face. You got to take some action. And in real life, even heroes, even experts can freeze up.
Mm-hmm.
So it puts that little emphasis on it. And I know, I have a couple of players I know at my table that, kind of freak out about it, maybe just a little bit.
One of mine does.
But usually it's not one of those things as a DM when, I say it's your turn, I'm not immediately flipping the timer.
No.
I usually give them, a few seconds, it's like, I'll say it's your turn, and I'll see what they're doing. Now, if they reach for their chin, and start scratching their chin and start thinking, or they go for a book, that's when I'll flip the timer and be like, okay, let's, you're on the clock, and that. So I find it works really, really well. And like I said, it's a 30-second timer. You can find them on Amazon. Heck, some of your old board games might have one.
That probably came from one.
Yeah. But it really does help combat move along, especially for players like we showed you, like the time wasters. They get in there and they're just taking way too long with a turn. It's like, I know when I can run 8 monsters faster than somebody's doing a turn. And what's funny is I've had players throw the timer on me, right?
Ooh.
Which
Ooh, I haven't heard that one before.
yeah, they'll get funny and they'll think they'll throw it on the DM, right? But then I'll just go through my actions.
Just flip it back over.
No, it really fast.
The DM is never late nor early.
So that's the time wasters. So the next type of players that we're going to discuss that you have at your table,
The group thinkers.
it's the group thinkers.
Waylon, it's your turn.
Okay, I think what I'm gonna do is
Okay, what she's going to do is she's actually going to come up here, over here, like right here. That way she's going to check for traps in this area, so that you can all stay. Okay, Darnavir, it's your turn.
Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and fire off I'll start moving forward. I'll drop my. What do you want me to do?
Corbin, it is your turn.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and fire a magic missile.
Well, actually, I'm not looking too good over here.
Okay, I'm going to heal him. So now you've seen some examples of the group thinkers. I know I've got several that'll crop up from time to time in my groups. I think we all do. As a DM, the group think is, it kind of depends on your group, I guess. When you have a brand new group, and they want to talk, and they're very laid back about it, it's fine. However you want to run your game, it's fine as long as everybody agrees, right?
I let it slide sometimes because I've been DMing for 4 years. You've been DMing for how many?
Too long.
Yeah, so I sometimes unintentionally spring things on my characters, whether it be NPC dialogue and they need to kind of think it together. I'll let that slide. But not when it's one turn and all like, what do we do? It's like, nah, you gotta figure it out. No, only you.
Right. So, the whole idea behind the groupthink is when you see players that start to kind of get aggravated when they're being told what to do. And as a DM, that's a moment when you want to step in. You want to say, hey guys, it's Braylyn's turn. Go ahead and let Braylyn do what she wants to do. Just kind of gently remind them that, a round is basically 6 seconds. They can say anything in open communication on their turn with 6 seconds worth of speech. One of the things I tend to do is if somebody's using a reaction or reacting in some way is, they can shout. It's a second of speech, like, ouch, yeah, shield, duck, everyone down. Kind of trying to put, some semblance of realism into the combat.
Given its time frame.
Given its time frame. But at the same time, these are mechanics that help your combat turns go faster. Cutting off the group discussion to let that one player make up their mind will let it go faster. Especially if you're implementing things like timers. So if the person's slow and they're on a timer and you don't let anybody interfere with their thoughts, they'll make a decision.
It's realism and it makes it go faster. So
it does both. And some people are like, yeah, but what if they make the wrong decision? Well,
that's tough.
it happens, right?
Yeah.
There's been many a time, me as a player, where I thought I was doing something right, and it turned out to be the wrong decision. Wise man once said, true learning only comes from failure. And so when you make a mistake and you forget something and don't do something correctly, you tend to remember, and that's a mistake you won't make again. We're like, shooting a bow and melee. If you didn't realize that, it's disadvantaged, you probably won't make that mistake again. But as a DM, go ahead and allow it to happen, enforce the rule, explain why. But they've learned, and they've learned on their own without somebody, telling them what to do. I think that's really important. I think the other thing with the groupthink is a lot of people don't realize there's actually mechanics in the game that allow that.
That's right.
I call it the Rary's rule. So if you've ever seen the spell Rary's telepathic bond,
it's basically groupthink.
It's basically groupthink, right? And it's a higher level spell, I know, so it doesn't come along very often. But if the party in my groups, if they're ever using Rary's telepathic bond, I allow them to do the group thing during a turn. Now I'm going to be Johnny on the spot with that timer, because if everybody's going off in your head, telepathically at once, that's now on them. That's not on the player, right? That's
concentration.
Yeah. But I call it the Rary's rule. So I just gotta remind them, hey guys, there's a spell for this, and if you're not using the spell, then please allow poor Braylon or Durnavir or Torben to take their turn on their own and make or fail on their own accord. So that's the one idea for the group thinkers. Now the last one I want to talk about as a player for managing this player is probably one of the most, I'm going to say, it's one of the most interesting. It's the precog.
Oh, yeah.
We
all have that one guy.
What
Whether
you're
it be D&D or not, we all have that one guy.
You didn't see that one coming?
No.
Durnavir, it's your turn.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move 30 feet.
Okay, when you get there...
I'll stay where I'm at, and I'm going to cast Cure Wounds on myself.
So that's the precog. Probably one of the most classic examples that you've seen out there. Now this is important. As a DM, I know you want to be Johnny on the spot as far as what's happening. But when dealing with the precog, let them explain everything. They're walking here, let them start getting into their attacks or their spells before you tell them that, 15 feet down the hallway, you set off the train.
I've had this happen before, and instead of jumping the gun and being too invasive, kind of being too controlling, I'll have to improvise it and say if they want to take back something that they're trying to do, like in the example, I'll say, well, while you're moving back, an arrow comes from the side and clips your hand or something.
Right.
It'll do the same amount of damage, but I'll have to improvise it for it to make sense, given that they're doing what they want to do.
You can do that. That is definitely one way to handle it.
You can do it. But
the other way to
tough.
handle it is as a DM is just roll time back just a little bit. It's not that big of a deal. So if a character is moving 30 feet down the hall, and let's just say there's a trap 15 feet down the hall, let him move the 30. Let him start rolling his attack roll. By that time, he's committed.
Mm-hmm.
If he's into the attack, he's committed. He's
Can't
gone
say
that.
you weren't.
Right, you can't say you weren't, right? So as he starts to do his attack roll, I'll say, before you make that attack roll, at 15 feet down the hallway, you hear this, and out comes that arrow. And he's like, well, then I wouldn't attack. And I'm like, well, that's fine. He's like, I wouldn't attack. I would do this instead. I'm like, totally fine. That little time rewind doesn't really hurt much. But what it does do is it stops the precog from doing something, the old, I didn't take my hand off the piece, the old chess move that
I didn't let go.
I didn't let go. You'll see the precogs do that, or changing their action. You'll let them start to roll dice on something, because by that time most people have agreed.
The dice have spoken.
Yeah, you have committed to that course of action. And then as a DM, rolling back that little bit of time isn't a big deal. It doesn't really slow anything down. But what it does do is it prevents the precog from jumping back and restarting, and then doing something and jumping back and restarting. Because by that time, if you've jumped the gun as a DM, then you've kind of given away something about the dungeon or a monster or a spell or whatever it may be that you don't mean to give away. So a little bit of patience goes a long way, especially when dealing with the precogs. So the next thing to talk about is info. In character
and out of character.
Info. So these things often get confused. Now what I find as a DM is if I can keep my players thinking in character, combat tends to go faster. When they're thinking out of character, that's where you get the tactician, you get the overbearing spouse, you get those types that want to jump in and do things when they're out of character. a lot of times I'll have to remind my players, you've never seen this monster before.
Mhm.
This is brand new. One mechanics you can use for those are the knowledge rolls. Knowledge, the arcana, religion, history, and whatnot, in order to see if they understand what a monster is, so they're not using out of character info.
No metagaming.
Yeah, no metagaming.
This is where you get metagaming. That can become a problem.
Yeah, and that's also can take things, start to delay combat. If they start talking about, we're
You get an argument on your hands.
Yeah, you get an argument on your hands and it goes off the rails. So I always try to steer them back to in-character info. Now, as a DM, I do something a little crazy for my players because for the most part, as a DM, when a player is talking and sitting at the table, I'm considering them in character.
Mhm.
So I'm going to take whatever they say as in character. Now, if a player wants to talk out of character, I make them do the horns.
The horns.
The Bullwinkle horns. And that means they're talking out of character.
It's so obvious you can't miss it.
It's so obvious you can't miss it when they're talking out of character. So that would be one of the things I would say to any DM. Have a way to know whether your players are talking in character or out of character.
Make it distinct. The
Yeah.
way that I do it at my table isn't as obvious, but we use body language. Either you're facing the DM and you're talking in character, or you're facing your party member and discussing what to say to the DM.
Right.
Speaking to the game and speaking to the DM.
Right. So, however your group decides to do it, making sure that they understand when they're talking in character and when they're talking out of character is something that can help combat speed, cut down on some crosstalk, or the biggest advantage is if two people are over the side and you can tell they're talking out of character, you don't have to pay attention to them. They're just talking out of character. Hopefully it's not their turn. But they're talking out of character.
Whatever you pick, make sure everyone's on the same page.
Right, make sure everyone's on the same page. I've seen some examples where they just raise their hand if they want to talk out of character. They just hold their hand up,
Yep.
the whole hand of Jesus. They put that up and they're talking out of character. And I've seen other things where some groups have actually used, the conch, where whoever has it is the one who can actually talk in character.
I've used the conch at this table.
So,
the first campaign I ran here, they would not stop talking.
yep.
We needed the conch.
Needed the conch. All sorts of ways to do the in character and out of character. The other thing I ask players to do sometimes is when they're thinking about their mini, especially if you're using minis, is I tell them don't stand over and look down on your mini. Stand behind your mini and look out.
Mhm.
This kind of gives them a perspective of what they may or may not see.
Yep.
Instead of kind of getting that total top-down tactical view that kind of lends them to think out of character.
You don't have wide-angle lenses as a character.
If
If all else fails, use an index card and have line of
Right.
sight.
But I encourage my players to go ahead and take that perspective view when it's not their turn, so they can kind of see, this is what you're seeing from your character's point of view, which can guide your actions. And it's like, if you don't know something's around a corner from your character's point of view, why would you consider it?
Right.
And so that will take something out of their thought equation and limit what they can do within the turn. The character can then justify his action. This is what I see. This is all I know. This is what I would do.
Right.
And you'll find out there's some really good players you'll have that can do that. They can keep things very in character and very out of character.
Mhm.
It's a good thing to have. So remember in character and out of character info, and have a way to identify when they're doing one or the other.
As a player, have a way to justify your actions if you're asked. Just make sure you can always justify it
Definitely.
reasonably.
Welcome to the jungle. We got fun and games.
Okay, so this last segment is really, really on the DM's shoulders because it can affect the speed of combat really quickly. We're talking about your bad guys. So as we all know, bad guys have special actions that a lot of characters don't have. I mean, I can think of a few. Legendary actions.
Some of
being a
the big
one.
ones have legendary actions that players never even touch.
Yeah, players never even get legendary actions. Things like pack tactics.
Yeah.
That's a big one. There's a few others that different things can have, like smite-like abilities,
Some
for
forget that
damage.
some monsters have meta magic.
meta magic, right? So the thing that happens and that can slow combat down is when one of your monsters performs one of these actions. The players will start to kind of look cross-eyed, and then they may want to start talking with you about how can it do that when we can't do that, and how
Because it's an eldritch being.
right, you
Yeah.
know, and you know sometimes you know the explanations can lead to a discussion, but I found a way. One of the ways as a DM you can head this off, which helps a lot, is simply tell them the name of the action that the monster's taking. So, for example, if we have wolves and I run one up and you know the players are hearing me throw 2 dice to hit the table, you know, then I'm saying as the wolf moves up with his friend in range, he uses pack tactics and roll.
Yeah.
And then you know they may ask, what does pack tactics do? Pack tactics gives them an advantage. And so they now have learned that wolves have this ability called pack tactics. And it's learning. And
Kind of play it kind of like a character.
yeah, you kind of play it kind of like a character. And when it's explained to them, they accept it.
They don't really have anything to refute
Right.
or argue about.
The big ones are legendary actions. You know, they cast
Yeah.
a spell, and you know, it's like I had this happen in one of my last games. They cast petrification on a bad guy, but it was the bad guy, and he had legendary actions. So I said, well, he fails his saving throw. However, he uses a legendary action in order to automatically make his save. And there was really no argument. I mean, it's
If you just say he failed the save, but he automatically saved, and they'd be like, what?
yeah.
Like, what does that even mean?
He failed to save, but he automatically saved. By giving it the context of the name of the ability, players will accept that easier.
You don't want your
and-
players to not trust you,
Right.
or think you're fudging rolls or cheating, because then you get the table against you, and they don't want to play.
Right.
You don't want to play because they think you're cheating. It's
Yeah.
not
So
nice.
I find that is one of the easiest ways is to simply, and you're not really giving anything away because if the monster's doing it, you
They're
know,
seeing it.
they're seeing it even as a character, and they'll just know that this monster has some kind of legendary ability or some skill or something that they don't have, and that's kind of to be assumed because they have skills monsters don't have. You know,
Whether they
I-
remember it or not is up to them.
right, and I know some are called lair actions, so like certain dragons and beasts in their own lair.
Yeah, in their room, they have special abilities.
Yeah. So and basically, I would just call it out. I said, as you know, when you finish your turn, the monster takes a lair action in order to make a claw attack at the nearest enemy. And they, you know, some of them are like, "What's a lair action?" And I'll explain. I'm saying, well, a lair action is an action that a monster can take when it's not his turn, and he only gets so many points per round.
I've had a whole dungeon be a layer, and when they enter, it takes effect until they beat the BBG, and then it goes away.
Right.
It was kind of evil. It was like -1 to your pluses to saves.
Yeah, those are more like effects, but you know,
I mean,
these
you roll 11, so then they're fine.
you know, lair actions are something usually triggered. You know, individual monsters will have them, like the other types of actions that they can have. Just goes along. It's just another flavor. Bonus, standard bonus, reaction, lair actions, legendary actions.
Right.
It's just another type of actions that they're typically not accessible to players. So players need to know it. And so when you use it, if you call it out, that helps a lot. And it helps it go smoothly.
How do we know the names? We are the people that can find whatever you may need.
So that's all the time we have for today. Speed of combat. Pretty essential to your gaming sessions.
Make sure everyone is on the same page about in and out of character speak. Make sure you all pick something, make it obvious, do whatever.
Yeah, make sure, you know, different ways to manage your different characters. Use the initiative trackers. Use the timers. You know, who's on deck. You know, try as a DM to really just kind of keep that pace moving. But then, as a DM, it's on you. You can't take forever with your turn either, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think one of the big tricks I make sure and do is, you know, if I have monsters or animals that have low intelligence, the actions are very quick and simple. You know, charge, eat, go home. You know, so, you know, you play the monsters to their intelligence. You know, but if you have a complex character, make sure you do some research beforehand. You know the party, know what they're capable of. How's this guy going to react? You know, depending on where he is.
Yeah, and be clear whenever that more high intelligence monster is making their actions or their reactions, be clear. Tell the party what's going on.
Yeah, that definitely goes, again, that goes a long way for their information and their acceptance to what they're probably not used to.
Mm-hmm.
So we hope this helps you speed up your games. You think about it like this, the faster you get through combat, the more you get to play.
Right.
So that's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining us again on Dungeon Masters 8.
Well,